Okay, the long-awaited steroids in the brain video of the latest study that I've looked at. Now, I did look at a study, but Jesus Christ, it was complex. And to be honest, I was going to struggle to be able to put that across in any simplified form. So I've looked at another one instead. Excuse the snoring, the boys are down here. So, the study I've looked at looks at, I'll give you the official title, the role of anabolic androgenic steroids in disruption of the physiological function in discrete areas of central nervous system. Basically what it's looking at is, do steroids cause increased anxiety or aggression? It looks at lots of areas and goes through how it affects in different areas. So I'm going to try and keep it as simple as I can. There are some technical terms, but I'll try and explain them the best I can. So steroids have an impact on different areas of the brain and different areas of the central nervous system. Now, directly within the central nervous system are androgen receptors, so they play a role in there. But they also influence neuropeptides, and they influence neurotransmitters, and they influence the release of these. So they can alter release of GABA, they can alter release of serotonin as well. This also can influence their receptors by either blocking them or making them hypersensitive. Now, though we look at steroids as generally binding with androgen receptors, certain steroids will bind with estrogen receptors and with progesterone receptors. Tren, for example, combined with estrogen receptors and progesterone receptors, and DECA combined with progesterone receptors. So it's not just the conversion of anabolics to estrogen, but you've also got to look at those that can have a direct impact on those receptors. Now, the main areas of impact within the brain are those that have the densest receptor concentration. But you've also got to remember as well that steroids will increase receptor concentrations. So when there's an overflow of androgens in the system, the density of receptors in certain areas will increase. Now, the main areas we're looking at for anger is the hypothalamus, the basal ganglia, and the amygdala, and the hippocampus. Now, in particular, the amygdala, however you want to say it, American English way, have a real big role in aggression and anxiety. And the hypothalamus also has quite a direct role in aggression too. Now, there's been a couple of studies that have shown that AAS users tested higher by respectively 22 and 23% than for levels of mental disorders, and for bipolar, and for major depression. Now, I know a lot of people will say, well, we don't know they had problems beforehand. And that's true, we don't. And I tend to find that when people start throwing this argument around, it's because they don't want to face that what they're doing might be damaging to themselves mentally. Now, the bottom line is with this, there's quite a lot of studies come out now showing that users have a higher incidence of depression and higher incidence of anxiety over non-users. And that both those groups, if they're trained individuals, have higher levels over non-trained individuals. And this is quite a few studies that are mirroring this now. So I don't think that's really to dispute. And if anxiety levels weren't elevated in users, then why has CBD oil been so popular with users? And we all know Tren causes anxiety. It's a common side effect. So, you know, I agree that these studies in an ideal world would track somebody who has mental health monitoring before usage, during and after usage. But unfortunately, we don't really have that pleasure. I believe the Oslo studies, the people who I'm hoping to go see in September, have revisited their test subjects from a previous study and are analysing any changes or developments in their brain structure and brain function, and looking at their usage alongside that as well. Now, another study, in general, the percentage of anxiety, severe anxiety, depression, bipolar, and mental disorders in non-users, the average is 4%. So we've got 22 and 23% in user population studies, and in the non-users population studies, it's 4%. So, that's quite a significant change in percentages. And then another study showed a 16% level of anxiety disorders, not depression or other mental health issues, but just purely anxiety-based issues. But these did range from just general mild anxiety right through to full-blown manic panic anxiety, which was preventing them from functioning in a normal manner. And anecdotally, I've seen and I've had clients come to me that have had issues to that degree, particularly with Tren, but also with Deca and even some with Just Test, where they've become completely and totally almost paranoid, and anxiety attacks have become very, very difficult to manage. And they've also got to a point where they were struggling to hold down a job and just go about normal life. It does in these studies, or in this paper that I'm looking at, that reviews these studies, actually go on to accept that some people may be predisposed, but it's still quite reasonable to suggest that there is a link between uses and issues, and I would fully agree with that with what I see anecdotally, that there is definitely an issue. I also do believe that people with issues do turn to usage as well, and I do believe that makes those matters worse. And I've seen people that have come off the back of weed consumption that have ended up with anxiety issues and then gone on gear, and it's made it worse. So yeah, there's a whole plethora of things going on there, and definitely a more relaxed attitude to drug taking, which would definitely be the basis of someone who would choose to use steroids, does play a role in predetermined anxiety. But the bottom line is, I don't think we're being far wrong by saying there's links there, and I think it's very genuine to be able to say yes, it does cause it. I think anyone that's really arguing that is just, one, either being a prick or for the sake of it, or two, is trying to look at not having to face their own demons and looking to try and justify it in another way, because what they're doing can't be wrong. Now, the Central Magadella deals with fear, threat, anxiety, and there's an area called, fucking get this right, I probably won't actually. It's the nucleus of the stria terminalis. Ooh, maybe I did get it right. Now this attaches to the amygdala via axons, and it's essentially amygdala, and the relationship between these two areas of the brain. Now the nucleus area is known as BNST, and there's quite a lot of discussion over basically the fact that we know very little about it. In fact, we know fuck all about it. But what they are seeing is that the interrelationship between these two and the balance between these two, if it goes out of whack, it triggers anxiety. So now AAS, anabolic steroids, increase GABA activity. Now this in turn inhibits the function of the BNST. This creates an imbalance and therefore causes anxiety. Now, BNST will actually respond and is well maintained by administering CRH, which is corticotropin releasing hormone. Yes, it's written down here, so I had to read it. So, to try and put this into something that's easy to understand, anabolic steroids increase GABA, the release of GABA. That in turn disrupts communication between the amygdala and the BNST causing anxiety. However, CRH has been shown to help protect from this effect. Now, it's reported that nandrolones are particularly effective at disrupting this communication between BNST and the central amygdala and increasing this release of GABA. And that would stand to what I've read in other researches about GABA release and nandrolones. And I can only really think that it's down to the fact that nandrolones have such a higher binding affinity than the other drugs. And therefore they have a greater impact on the release of GABA, and thus the effects that GABA has cascading down from that point. Now, there's also quite a number of estrogen receptors within the brain, both estrogen receptor alpha and estrogen receptor beta. Now, these help control aggression, help control fuse, and our management of our own aggression. And obviously, as we've already discussed early on, steroids can impact these receptors. They can make them more sensitive, or they can even trigger them. Now, what we've also seen is that steroids also impacts 5-HT, or serotonin. It can reduce serotonin, and low levels of serotonin have shown to increase aggression impulsivity. So basically, our fuses, we get more reaction, we react quicker, our fuse is shorter, we're less tolerant. And I know, even though I never really had bad anger issues with gear, I did know that my fuse would get a lot shorter. I'd be a lot more outspoken. Now, you can interpret that as various things: greater confidence, greater security, but you can also interpret that as being more confrontational. Excuse me a second. So, there's probably some of that is open to interpretation by the individual concerned, but definitely it shows an increase in people in their response to stimulus in a negative way. So people are more confrontational. Now, that may just be that they're more open at expressing their opinion on the situation and more forceful at expressing their opinion, which to some people may actually be a positive, particularly if they've been subject to bullying or generally been a bit of a mouse or a wallflower and sort of stayed back in the background. They will find their voice, but obviously this can go further as well. Now, obviously, predeceding levels, predetermined or preceding levels of serotonin and genetic makeup of serotonin and GABA within the brain will have an impact on how people react. Some people will be more sensitive, and therefore get a greater reaction. Some people will be less sensitive, therefore get a lower reaction. Some people just generally have lower levels of receptors. But in all cases, there is a change here. Now, whether that accumulates into behavioral change will depend on the individual concerned. But the changes are going on in the brain. That may not always show as in physical behavior or verbal behavior, but they are still going on. Long-term steroid use will cause low levels of serotonin, and there's quite a few studies that have shown, remember serotonin is our feel-good drug, there's quite a few studies that have shown that generally speaking, a large number of long-term users have generally a lower mood, so they're generally a bit more down. Not everybody, but across the averages, there is an increase in that area with ex-users or long-term users. But it also, and this is where it starts getting complex, an increase in 5-HT2 alpha receptors. These in turn can inhibit the 5-HT1 alpha receptor. Basically what it's saying is that it will change the various serotonin receptors, and one can downregulate, which is the one that has the positive impact of serotonin. Now, steroids also increase the release of AVP, or vasopressin, So now this is in animal studies, so this hasn't been shown in humans as yet. But what it showed was that an increase to exposure in steroids in adolescents increased AVP and AVP fiber density, which is arginine vasopressin. What did this do? Well, it causes a significant increase in baseline aggression levels. It also was shown to increase AVP receptors. So basically the whole AVP system is regulated. We produce more AVP, well, in rat models, they reproduce, actually I think it was hamsters. In hamsters, Lambo, watch out. They produced more AVP, and as a result more AVP receptors, and the baseline aggression of these animals increased. Now, obviously, animal study, all the usual arguments go ahead. Well, it may not translate to humans. No, it may fucking not translate to humans. And I'm not for 1 minute saying it does. But looking at what else we've seen that actually has been done in humans, I would say it's worth bearing in mind that there may be changes in that mechanism if you use steroids early on in life. So 16, 17, 18, 19. It's basically between sort of 15 and 24. Those periods of time can dramatically increase base levels of aggression. In animal studies, there is a strong chance that might carry over into humans. Now, last bit. NMDA, or N-methyl-D-aspartate. It's a glutamate. Now, anabolics alter the NMDA receptor, which results in an increase in aggression, impulsivity, and irritability. Basically makes us a grumpy ratty twat. It's as simple as that. It also affects dopamine. And dopamine has an effect on so many different levels. So it can affect movement, memory, pleasure, reward. One of the reasons why when you take DECA, you get a reduced pleasure reward from recreational drug use, and it can lead to an increase in recreational drug use, is because of its effect on dopamine. And again, I think the nandrolones are very key in this because they have such a higher binding affinity, therefore have a much stronger effect. So, behavior and cognition, inhibition of prolactin production. It can affect sleep, mood, and learning ability. Now, not inhibition of prolactin production, I got that wrong. Inhibition of a control mechanism for prolactin production. Basically, the control mechanism is removed, resulting in an increase of prolactin. And that's from all AAS, so not just nandrolones. Obviously, nandrolones are renowned for having a greater effect. But that is the mechanism. So it's through dopamine that our prolactin is increasing due to ASS's impact on dopamine. So the changes in dopamine lower our prolactin controls, which in turn causes our prolactin to increase. Okay, so basically AS can lower dopamine, which can in turn increase prolactin, and that is all AAS, but it is more pronounced in nandrolones, as we know. It can also, a lowering in prolactin can increase P2R, which I don't know what that is. Let me look, because I forgot to write it down. Sorry, D2R, dopamine receptor, dopamine 2 receptor. My fucking writing's terrible. So it can increase D2R, which is dopamine 2 receptors, which in turn increases AVP again. So we're back to the vasopressin. So you can see how the whole thing sort of interlinks and rides over each other, and so where all these mechanisms playing at the same time can increase aggression. So there you go. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. Sorry about the little mistake at the end. I couldn't read my own fucking writing. So I'll get this fired up, guys. It's a long one, 20 minutes worth. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.